Okay.
First and
Whoa.
foremost, how are you? Did you hear that?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so we're gonna use definitely the audio for the podcast. So we're gonna make sure when I ask you questions, maybe as articulate as possible, so people who hear audio only can do their best to imagine what we're talking about.
Oh, wow. Pressure's on. Okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. So can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Shelah Horvitz. I'm a painter. I've been a painter all my life. Um, what else do you need to know?
What is your background? Where did you get your start?
Okay. Um, well, I'm from New England. I can't really talk about my background without talking about my mother because she studied at the Boston Museum School in the 1950s. And then the Boston Museum School had been started in the turn of the last century by some American Impressionists who had studied in Paris in the ateliers there. So she hadn't made it all the way through. She ran out of money, but she did teach me from like the time I was 4, some of the basic atelier techniques, and through the lens of an impressionist. So one of the first things that she taught me was how to see the underlying colors in the light, that sort of thing. It means that I have a different approach towards color from any of the atelier people that I've encountered. I also, so I started really young. I was studying from her anatomy texts at like the age of 10. That's around when I got serious. There were all these books around the house, Rembrandt and all the Wyeths and like when I was 4, my favorite artist was Renoir. Now I can't look at him, I can't stand him, but for a 4-year-old, he was just totally the rage. The Symbolists, there was a book of the Symbolists, Winslow Homer. I mean, there were all these great art books that I used to just pore over when I was a child. And in high school, I went to an all-girls school in Providence called Wheeler that had been started in the 19th century by a woman who was very interested in the arts, personally friends with Monet. She would bring her girls over to Paris. They would like climb over Monet's walls and visit. So there was this awesome studio there. It looked a lot like N.C. Wyeth's studio. Yeah, I was working from the antique and stuff when I was, I don't know, 13 or so. I had been, drawing myself from the nude in my bedroom when I was 10, that sort of thing. And when I got to college, it was a totally rude awakening because it was in the middle of, really the depths of modernism. And you were not allowed to do realistic work. And so I really headbutted with my professors because they couldn't draw. And I didn't think I was really good because I was mostly self-taught, but they really wanted me to drop everything I was doing and work their way. And that didn't work. So,
well, how was that experience for you when
destructive?
And you really wanted to move forward in vision you wanted to develop in your education, and your teacher said no? What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was horrible. I kind of got thrown out of the art department. I used to go down between classes when I was in high school. I used to walk down College Hill in Providence and just soak up the stuff in the Rizzi Museum. I spent so much time in the Rizzi Museum when I was in high school and college because I went to Brown for college.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into a lot of trouble at Brown for studying the old masterworks in the RISD Museum because it was out of touch with the trends in modern art. So, you know, all that stuff became my secret vice. You know, I did a lot of studying archaeologically, trying to figure out, you know, like what were the layers in Rembrandt's paintings?
Right.
You know,
You
how,
referenced a lot of art books, and did you
yeah,
have your own personal research and figure
of
out
course,
a way
of course.
of doing
Yeah,
everything?
yeah. So my art education was mostly in the stacks. At Brown, they've got this incredible library, and so everything that I did in class, I got in trouble for. There was I had a friend there who was the only other person that I knew who wanted to work realistically, and we started a school, the two of us amongst ourselves, the School of Defiant Traditionalism. He didn't stay an artist, I did, and I stayed a defiant traditionalist, but it wasn't so much that I wanted to be traditional. I didn't see technique as an end. It's a means, it's a tool. I wanted to speak a visual language that people who are not specially trained in art can understand. What I really wanted to do was talk about philosophy, talk about
I noticed on your website, you mentioned that you seek to understand wisdom through your artwork.
yeah,
The spiritual endeavor. So
right.
what themes are you seeking? How is it a spiritual endeavor for you?
It's almost all, it's always been about breaking down the walls between us and them. It is always, like right from the start, back when I was like 20 or younger than that, it was about connection, unity, across nature, across races, across genders, breaking down us and them by establishing empathy. And you know, a lot of people don't like that, but
Because it requires breaking down your own personal barriers to see beyond it and go, now I see what they feel and what they feel and think about things.
Right. So what I've been trying to do really since I was a kid is technically get to a point where you're actually not thinking about the style. You know, like every mark that you make in a piece of artwork, it's a language and it conveys certain things. Like if you achieve a sense of luminosity and lightness, that implies that produces a mood. It produces a mindset that your viewer can either embrace or reject. But all of the technical decisions that I make for what I want, where I want to go, what effects I want to achieve, that's never for cool factor. It's always because this is a place I want to take the viewer.
Yeah.
You know, I want to take them to a higher place within themselves.
Yes.
I want to take them to a place where they can achieve lightness, where they can achieve openness, where they can go into depth.
Yes. So with them having not think about style, they can focus on transcendence.
Yeah. Like for instance, if you were to study Orwell, you know, at a deep level, you know, besides 1984, what was he trying to do? He consciously worked in what they called plain style in the British schools. You know, it's kind of like when you're in classes on expository writing. you're not doing flashy language. You're trying to get across your point in the cleanest possible way. And that sort of thing, plain style, is what I'm trying to do in the painting. I don't want you to think about my drips. I want you to think about where I'm taking you.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to okay, so I got out of Brown having picked up a lot of bad habits because of bad advice the professors were giving. Like, for instance, use as much paint as you can. Just squeeze it out directly onto the canvas, and just advice that would work if I were a neo-expressionist. Advice that has nothing to do with where I wanted my paintings to go.
Right.
So I put it in a remedial year at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, which was, practically within a bike ride of where I lived. It was 15 miles away from my parents' house or something like that. And then after that, I went to New York City to make it big time, which means that I worked a day job, painted nights and weekends, pounded the pavements at the galleries, was rejected by about 100 galleries. It was, I remember in the East Village, one dealer had the time to talk to me at length, and he told me why I should just completely stop painting. And I left the gallery with tears streaming from my face, and my then husband saw me and said, "I want you to stop this now." And I told him, I can't. This is what I want my life to be. I can't stop. Can't stop. I have to just keep on going. Oh, it was horrible.
Your passion for your artistry transcended what anyone had to say.
Yeah, I couldn't. It was an identity thing, it was really the only thing I valued. I didn't value money or power. I did value love, but it's the only thing I wanted to do in life.
Yes.
So I went to grad school after that. I got into the University of Texas at San Antonio, where, and I chose that because there were a number of places where I could have gone to grad school, but I was married at the time. I'd put my husband through podiatry school, and there were a number of places where he had a choice for a residency, and this was one of the cities. And the good thing about UTSA was that the department was about half realistic and half abstract, and I liked that because I didn't want to be hidebound, but I didn't want to be loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
Wanted to actually learn something.
Yes.
At UTSA, I also learned Blessed Little. They also had good stacks. Basically, what I learned there is how to hang in there when a piece isn't working, and pulled the chestnut out of the fire.
Yeah.
But I still didn't really get training. Oh, okay, and so when I got out of school, I didn't get a professorship, and getting a professorship had a lot to do with uh, whose protege were you, and connections and things like that. Anyhow, I didn't get a professorship, which meant that I was totally dead in the water. I had to go back to school, became a software engineer, which was like dying. And it was a violent thing to do to my head, because I had to like sort of cut off everything alive and juicy and think like a machine. But that was the only way I was able to make a living wage. So I worked as a software engineer for 25 years and painted the whole time, and couldn't get into shows because I was realistic. By the time I was 40, I came to the conclusion that I had to cut this art habit, because it was an attachment that was killing me. It was just sucking my blood, breaking my spirit, making me, it was just horrible, because there were no ins. I just couldn't get anywhere. Now, I did do really well when I was in Texas. At one point, I was with 3 different galleries, and I was playing them off each other. But when I left Texas, nobody would show me. Like I was showing in a really nice gallery in Houston. I showed those slides of those same works in Boston, and they were like, "Get out of here." So yeah, I was untouchable when I came back to New England. But anyhow, so when I was 40, I decided I had to quit art like quitting heroin. Like it was that kind of thing that was just sucking my blood. And I quit art for a year. And then I decided to go back, because it was like not being alive.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you found out that, you know what, no matter what, this is my lifeblood.
I have to do it. I have to do it. I read an interview with Willem Dafoe at around that time, and he was talking about the craft of acting. And he was talking about how being an artist, you're really an artist if it's an identity thing. What are your motivations for doing art? Are you, if it's ambition, that's a bad motivation. If it's how you see the world, how you make sense of the world, that's a good motivation. So I kept on with it.
So it ends up bringing you back to your original process of why you make art. It's a spiritual endeavor. Exactly. It just made it full circle for you. Went through this whole spiritual journey of the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell talks about. Is first you are given the option, you refuse it, you go through all these trials, tribulations, but you end up coming back.
And it is exactly the hero's journey. Yes. You do go to hell, and you come out the other side, and then you're ready to start making good work.
Yes.
And so, but I still had to make a living, so, and I kept on with it. And I did a body of work after body of work after body of work after body of work, and it was good stuff. And I'd bring it around to the galleries, and sometimes they'd laugh at me. And towards the end of towards the aughts, it actually got a lot worse. I mean, like in the 80s, you could bring your slides, and they would roll their eyes and say, "Not for us." But in the aughts, you bring your slides around, and the dealers would not even let you open your portfolio. And then you try to make appointments to show your portfolio, and they'd say, no, we don't want to see your work. So you didn't even have a chance to be rejected. And this went on for like 20 years. So in 2017, well, let's back up. Around the beginning, around, I don't know, 2009, 2010. I'd been a software engineer for a long time, but I'd known even before I got into the field that an engineer had a shelf life of about 10 years, because you're always competing with the kids straight out of school. They're cheaper and they only know the new stuff, and that's all the companies care about. And so there's this this thing where you're always trying to have beginner's mind. You're always trying to learn the new thing as an engineer, but it's so exhausting. And
Sure.
And as your bosses get younger and younger, they project their mother issues on you, and it becomes a real problem. And I knew that I wouldn't make it to retirement age, because there are blessed few engineers over 40 in these companies. Over 50 is really pushing it. The fact that I was able to extend my career for 25 years was a feat, especially because, no girls in the treehouse, especially because I don't think like an engineer. The whole time I was in the field, it was like writing with your left hand if you're right-handed.
But to the benefit, your creative mind, your right brain helped
Yeah.
you extend your career. You're able to think outside of the box and be really.
Oh no, it was all left brain. All left brain. And it was a real problem for the art, because having to kind of mutilate my brain that way, if you get into a mindset of having to look for missing semicolons and that sort of thing, which is what you have to do to code, it affects the way you paint.
Interesting.
I became too literal. It became a real problem. I saw it happening. I couldn't stop it. So anyhow,
That's very interesting. Can you just explain more of that? How you living a very linear life affected your painting and artistry versus when you were more free to
explore. Oh yeah, sure.
Talk about it in detail. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I was going to grad school, this was awesome. I developed the ability to have visions at will. Okay, so like if you were to read Carlos Castaneda, say you read the teachings of Don Juan, where he's talking about taking mushrooms and going off and becoming a crow, flying over Mexico or something like that. Around, so in my 40s or my 50s, for many years I was an animal painter. And why was I an animal painter? Because I wanted to learn from animals. I wanted to learn from, like I would get a vision, say, of a coyote or a fox or a deer or something like that, and I would go in to understand what do I need to learn from this animal, and while drawing them, while painting them, I wasn't doing it on purpose. I observed from the outside after I was done, but the way I would go in and learn from them is I would go in through their bones, inhabit their bodies, right, feel through them.
And you would do this through your visions of imagining of walking in their skin, and then you would create that, and you'd create the form, and you'd really capture the essence of them from your previous visions.
Right. And just that that's just how I work. That's why I work realistically. I can't understand another person, another animal, a tree, a mountain, if I don't go into the bones.
Right.
Okay, that's why I'm not a photographer, because I need to spend that time understanding the anatomy to go in.
Right.
I forgot where.
And then in turn, because you were saying how when you were able to be more creative and right brained, you would have access to visions. You can go into the being and the thinking state of the animal specifically. So you can do studies around it, you make your paper. In turn, when you were living this left brain life, how that affected your artistry in what ways?
I had to cut that off. I had to cut that off. No more visions.
And your painting got like super linear. You had to be very procedural and
yeah. And it was a real problem. When in 2000, well, okay, so in the early 2000 teens, well, I married my current husband, Olav, who's a writer. He was originally trained as an artist out at UC Davis, studied under Wayne Thiebaud, which is really cool. But because I knew that I wouldn't make it to retirement age, I had to solve the problem. How do you live post money? I had a close friend in high school. Her name is Amy Breyer. She became a limestone sculptor in Bloomington. And she was able to live and work as a sculptor because she kept her overhead down. And I thought about that for years. How do you live cheaply? Because, I'd been living in the Boston area because I was working as an engineer, and also because my parents were alive, and I needed to be near them because they were getting on. And so where within a commutable distance of Boston could I buy land that I could grow some food on? That was the idea that I came up with around 2010, of how do you live post money? You have to find a place that's cheap enough that you can buy cash, and keep your taxes down and all that. I didn't think it was possible. At the time, I had done a number of really good series that I just couldn't get going in the Boston area. And the last series, which was my feral series, when I had a solo show, which I paid for at, in the Boston galleries, a lot of these galleries are actually supported by the artists because there's so little demand for art in Boston. And so I had a solo show, and the weekend of the opening, the show that one of the Boston Globe critics happened to have thought was good enough, interesting enough to do a review on, was by a guy who did a series of canvases. I don't know, maybe they were like 16 by 20 or something like that. They were all pink. Each one said, the next one will be so much better. And that broke me, because I can't compete with that. I can't compete with, in an art world, that values that. That is a completely different definition of art from what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if what I do is not considered art, I thought, well, I went to Brown and majored in literature because, when I was in high school, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a writer or a painter. And I decided to become a painter after my writing teachers had said that my writing was too juvenile. I mean, I was 19 and they were saying that the work was juvenile. And I said, well, duh, but but I had said, okay, when I'm older, I'll write. So I, at the time, so this is around 2010, I was still working as an engineer, and it was such a hostile environment. I felt it was kind of like being a mole in a whack-a-mole game. You stick your head up and everybody like whacks it. And so I had chronic insomnia, and the only way I could get to sleep at night was by imagining myself a fox underground in a hole. The only place where I could be safe would be underground. And so I started.
It's very interesting symbolism, because the fox is a transforming creature, right? And then you're going into this safe space, this dark, quiet, safe space for you to be isolated. And that's actually very interesting imagery.
It becomes more interesting if you think about the Japanese archetype of the kitsune, okay, or the recently I've been reading about Kabbalah, how you can't reach you can't reach into the heavens unless you're deeply rooted in the earth.
As above, so below.
Right. So yeah, I needed to go into the earth. So anyhow, I started working on this novel, exploring a character for whom there is no one like him. I was writing on the last Sasquatch. So it was an orphan Sasquatch who goes on a walkabout at around the age of 5, and encounters a female engineer who had been sort of trounced out of the field and was living essentially in an underground house. There's this book that I found on the internet a long time ago. It was the $50 Underground House book.
Okay.
Written by a guy who lived in Minnesota or Montana or something like that. And I thought, okay, so if you can afford it, if you can take your life savings, and your life savings aren't that much because, food and rent is so expensive in the Boston area, but say you've got, a couple of $100,000, which is very little, and you got to live on that for the rest of your life. How can you do that? If you can afford, some cheap piece of land and dig a hole in there that you can live in. So this was my theoretical, and I had my character doing this. And, I wrote the novel, and the idea about writing the novel was, I don't know why I'm going to be kept out of the literary world, which is so freeing, because I know why I was being kept out of the art world. But I have beginner's mind. I don't know my blocks. I don't know the bullshit reasons. I'm not going to be allowed in. So that means I can do my creative work without no's. Okay. So I wrote my novel. I couldn't get it published because it didn't fit all the formulae that the publishing world loves. But that in doing research for my novel, I found this place. Where can my character live? How much would she have to spend? And in doing this this search of okay, what about the radius of an hour from Boston? Not too expensive. 2 hours from Boston, not too expensive. 3. So at around 4 hours from Boston, I found this place that was really freaking affordable. And it was in the woods in Maine. And I said, oh, my character could live there. She wouldn't even need to dig a hole. She could live in a house. I could live there. And so, yeah, so, I talked with my husband about it. We went to see the place and we bought it. It was like turnkey. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, mm-hmm. This is my way out of engineering. So
15 acres.
Yeah, 15 acres of woods.
Wow.
Yeah, a brand new house, just, on brookfront, gorgeous, out in the wilderness. Yeah. So for a third of the price of a Boston condo. Mm-hmm. Like, yes. Oh my God, we can do this. And so so for several years, so I was working at this company where my immediate boss said, you want to work remotely a few days a week? No problem. And so I did that. My husband and I commuted the 4 hour each way, yeah. Every weekend. And, we'd have to start at around 4 a.m. to make it to work. Yes. But we did it and we made it work. And in 2017, my boss's boss said, you're not allowed to do this. If you're going to insist on doing this, we're going to fire you for having abandoned your job, even if you're working remotely. And so I spoke with my husband. What do you want to do? And we decided to move up permanently.
Right.
So, because I was 56 at that time, it was so hard. It was so brutal for me at work. It had gotten so bad. Mm-hmm. And I really just couldn't bear taking another engineering job after that, because it was literally killing me. Doctors have been telling me for years, the job is killing you. All kinds of medical problems from the stress. So, so my husband and I decided to just move up here, and we tried at first to be self-sufficient. It was the growing season's too short. You just can't. But we're doing okay. We're doing okay because everything is so cheap up here. And a year into it, I found out on the internet, just looking around, what's going on in the art world. I found out, oh my God, realism is back. There's this whole thing, the atelier world. All these people are offering the kind of training I was killing myself for at 20. Oh my God, and you can get this online.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
It's been exceptionally freeing for you because of all your trial and tribulations, all this struggle, this back and forth of this postmodern art world, and you're trying to get all these things going and trying to move forward in your education, trying to move forward in expressing
mhm,
yourself,
mhm,
and keep getting confined. You finally
yeah,
see, here's the
yes,
out.
yes. And it's like life began. Life began at 56, actually 57. It wasn't until 2018 that I found out about this. But oh my God, I just regret all those lost years. But I mean, those lost years were spent doing the soul searching, doing the psychological work, doing the philosophical work. Um, you know, really giving me the content foundation to do the work, because yeah, technique is nice, but it's not the end. You've got to have something to say.
Right.
It's not enough to just say, look how nicely I can do this leg.
And you feel your whole life experience helped you create what
Absolutely.
your creative voice,
Yeah.
your seeking of unity, your seeking of helping the audience transcend
Yeah.
their current everyday life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent.
So, um, so I started studying everybody I thought was good, looking to see
Which
who
artists
follows.
did you go for education? Which atelier did you associate and study
Yeah.
under?
Okay. I started, well, at the time, because I was living in this beautiful place, I started just doing landscape because it was all around me. And because there aren't a lot of people and nobody I asked would pose. They all said, oh, I'm too old and ugly. You can't, no, don't look at me. So,
Another way.
so, so I started doing landscapes, and I found some artists on Pinterest who I thought were good. One in particular, Mark Bonney, he was big in Oregon. He moved to Massachusetts. We since became kind of friendly, but I always wanted to do figures in landscape. Why in landscape? Because out in open air, that creates, okay, it gives you a sense of unity with nature. And if you look at some of the a lot of the work that I did when I was in grad school down in Texas, I have models who were brave enough to go naked out in those fields with the fire ants, the chiggers, all the horrible things that, and the the helicopters, the flyovers. I was painting figures in the landscape back then in my late 20s. But yeah, that's kind of always where I've been. But I knew that I really didn't know how to do a landscape. Nobody had trained me to do a landscape. So I spent 2017, 2018 researching books on how to do composition in landscape. And I did.
And which books did you find were the most helpful to you?
Oh, gee. I mean, I can't remember. I can't remember who wrote them. I'd have to look them up. I'd have to pull the ones from my library. In general, when I look up the books that have been the most useful to me, they're old. Those old guys before things were dumbed down for modernism knew their material. But so I studied composition. I looked very hard to see who do I think is good. Got obsessed with Isaac Levitan. and those itinerant Russians. But I did some a lot of landscapes, and I got one as a finalist at the in the ARC salon. I don't remember what year, but I realized that without further training, I couldn't get higher. So at the time, Stephen Bauman was offering online training, and he was like the only one. I didn't know that Scott, what the hell is his name? There was a guy who studied at Grand Central, who offers figurative painting, basically window shading classes online. I didn't know about him at the time. I only knew about Bauman. And so originally, I just wanted to learn landscape. He didn't do landscape. He only did portraits, but, form is form. So I studied with Bauman online for about a year, and he was very helpful. But I got to a point where the lessons were getting repetitive because it wasn't private classes. He was teaching a bunch of people through Patreon. So after a year, I left him. I did a workshop with Amaya Gurpide, the Basque draftsman, and she's wonderful. I did that down in South Carolina. And she had some, answers to some of the questions that I'd been wondering about for literally decades. And then I started doing master copies. Doing a Rembrandt master copy was really interesting because it was very similar to the way that Amaya draws. Around this time, I was just learning about the atelier movement. Once I learned about Instagram, it changed everything. Instagram, a lot of people hate it, but they don't remember what things were like before. Mm-hmm. Back in the 80s, if you'd go to an art opening, the artists, if they didn't know you, you were untouchable. If you were just a chick, you were untouchable. Galleries in the 80s were the most hostile place in the world. Nobody wanted you there. I remember going into a gallery in Boston in the aughts, and the dealer just turning his back on me. The amount of no's that you'd get in the art world before the atelier world was off the charts. It was just one big no. The atelier world is the opposite. People are so nice. They are so generous. And
they definitely want to aid you in your success. And
it's like, yeah, it's like, where have you been all my life? Oh my God, I love you. And there's so much kindness, so much mutual support. Nobody cares if you're black or white, male or female. They don't care. They just want to know, are you good? It's so fair. I'm not used to that level of fairness. It's so wonderful. Anyhow, so, I started looking at who's on Instagram, who studied where, who's looking at whom, who's friends with whom. Everybody's got demos. Everybody's got videos. And so I was studying everybody. Every morning I'd spend 3-4 hours looking to see what's out there. How do they do this? How do they do that?
So what
And
did your morning ritual look like at this
Yeah.
time? Because it sounds like your morning ritual was you spending 3 or 4 hours studying. So you woke up, you just got some tea or coffee, and you're like, okay, let's go. Right?
Yeah.
Various different teachers, or was it a certain set of teachers for a time, then you moved on? What was your protocol like at this time?
You know, I generally would have a strategy, as in I recognize I have this particular weakness. Who doesn't have this weakness and how do they work? And I don't want just one. If there's a solution, I want a few different solutions. How do these guys work? Let's try this. Does it work for me? Is it the way I think? No. What about this other guy? Is it the way I think? So I spent really, it seems like years, but I think it actually was like 2 years, almost no time at all, in which I was watching tons of videos, mostly online workshops.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of experimenting. How does this person work? How does that person work? And a lot of it has been a winnowing out of getting clearer in my mind. What do I want to say? How do I want to say it?
Right.
So I'd spend. Do you know about Rimbaud?
Okay.
Arthur Rimbaud, the poet?
Mm-hmm.
He had this fascinating high school period. People study his notebooks because he essentially did pastiches of every modern point, every point in development of French poetry, from like the medieval to the 19th century, and he did one a week. So as he encountered them in school, he would do another one, just working his way through poetic history. And that is kind of how I learned.
Right.
I learned painting very much the way Rimbaud learned poetry.
Right. That's an
So
excellent way to build, because you're taking your time to learn this type of method and style, and then okay, cool, and then you move on to the next one, and so on and so forth.
right.
And then at the end of all of it, you formulated your own style, and you found a
right.
voice and vision of way
Right.
Excellent.
Yeah, like for instance, when I was going to UMass Dartmouth, I encountered a book with drawings by Egon Shelah, and I said, oh my God, it looks like I did these. I must have been this guy in a past life. Wow. And I got obsessed with Shelah. And hold on, why am I talking about Shelah? Oh yeah. And yeah. And so when I went to New York City, after that.
And around what time is this, you going back to New York City?
1983. Okay. So when I went to New York City, I worked my day job within 10 blocks of Gallery Saint-Étienne, which was one of 2 major galleries at the time in New York City that showed Egon Schiele's work. And I was so hardcore into him, I could tell whether he had done a piece in 1910, 1911, 1912. I knew Shelah like the back of my hand, and I could bang out something in his style, like in an hour, I could bang out a kind of Shelah. And I brought my work around to the galleries, and they said, "Oh, you're really derivative." And I learned from that experience, you copy one master, they say, "Oh, you're really derivative." You copy 10 masters and you've got your own style.
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't it Picasso who said that, like, great artists steal, right? So good artists copy, or students copying, great artists steal. Essentially, like, you take one or two people and people see you as a version of that person, but you just
you know,
masters and you find your own way, and then just like, oh, this is you.
well, and I've talked to Will St. John, Colleen Barry about this kind of thing. I don't believe that an artist can steal, because yeah, you can steal something superficial. You can steal, oh yeah, I use a lot of cadmium green too, or or yeah, I'll draw that line around that shape or something like that. That's superficial. What you can't steal from another artist is the core. Because the core is who you are. Every mark you make is an expression of every experience you've had. Mm-hmm. I can superficially work like Shelah, but I'm nothing like Shelah. I can't really do a Shelah. You can do a bit of method acting. A good forger would do method acting, mm-hmm. But we're not out there to be forgers. You might pick up a bit from somebody's bag of tricks. Right. So, like when I do a master copy, and I'm still doing master copies. When I do a master copy, I'm not asking, how did this person mix this color or lay it down? What I'm really asking is, how do they think? Does that thinking suit me? Would it add? Would it just confuse things? So, are you stealing? I don't really think you can steal. You can emulate. The great fashion designer, Yohji Yamamoto, mm-hmm. He was really big in the 80s. Wim Wenders did a film on him, in which you see Yohji make this comment: "Yeah, a lot of people copy me, but they can't do me." Now, I'm paraphrasing, but what he's really saying is, yeah, you can do a lot of pieces with simple lines in black and white, but you're not going to get the way I think.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
So, I'm still refining my technique, and I expect to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm always looking for beginner's mind. I'm always looking to put aside what I know and put myself into a position with every piece where I don't know how to do it. And I have to fall back on general principles and experience.
So then what is your process to making a piece? You're getting your models, or maybe sometimes pulling some other references, mm-hmm. and then how are you starting your piece? Are you getting tracing paper? Are you what is your process? Or is it different each time, because you said always looking for a beginner's mind?
Yeah, the process, I have a general process that's pretty consistent, but in specifics, it changes a lot every time. For instance, I don't have a fixed palette, but what's consistent is that I'm always looking at the color of the light. Sometimes I'll start out with a vision. That's actually pretty rare. I don't want to have it too pinned down in before I start. Like, for instance, I never, when I was a kid, I used to start with like, I'll have this idea and I'll draw it out before having any models or something like that. But I found that that didn't work for me, because if that initial drawing didn't look good, I'd lose all enthusiasm for the idea. So from there, I moved to, I might write it down in words.
Got it.
And then I found that if I wrote an idea down in words and it was still a good idea 3 months later, that probably would last.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't follow that. If I don't have 3 months to wait. So if I have an idea, I try not to pin it down too much. And this comes from that problem I had to overcome from being an engineer, of being too analytical. I now try to get it to a point where I can kind of sort of talk about what I want to get across, but leave things really open.
Right.
And if there are things that just feel at a gut level like they have to be there, but it doesn't make logical sense, I don't exclude that anymore.
Sure.
Well, not sure, because I used to.
Mm-hmm.
But now I say, let it be. And this is something that I learned from David Bowie. You understand, Bowie was definitely one of my huge creative teachers. Laurie Anderson too. But there is nothing, you can't really do anything that hasn't been done before. There's nothing really original, but you learn from watching Bowie that the way to be innovative, the way to push things in an unexpected way, is the mashup, taking disparate ideas that other people wouldn't think of putting together and putting them together and seeing what they do. So if your ideas don't necessarily logically work together, they still might work together on an intuitive level, or they might lead you somewhere that would be interesting. Okay, so like on the series that I was working on last year, COVID was starting to open up. So for the first time in a while, you could actually contact a model and meet with somebody. So I had this idea starting out. Okay, I want to figure in a landscape. I found, and the only models that I could get to show up, because I live way out in the middle of nowhere, I had to drive down to Portland, Maine, which is a 2-hour drive each way, because the models all lived in Portland and they weren't going to come up to me. And I'd say, okay, I want to see far, because I want to be able to get that psychological sense of expansion. So I'd ask these models, okay, where around you can you see far? And they said, well, you could go to the water. There's this state park here. Okay, so we went to state parks, and the first one, we just went to a state park and she showed up in a gown.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, that's interesting. And the next one, she showed up at a different park. And I was thinking about that other one. I was thinking about the gown. I was thinking, I was thinking since the first one, and well, actually both of these were the shoots were by the ocean. I thought, well, it's good to set up your model with a narrative. What narrative can I do at a Maine beach?
Mhm.
Maine doesn't really have sandy beaches, at least not by Portland. But what they do have is these amazing rocks, these really cool rock structures. So that led me to think about shipwrecks,
Mhm.
which led me to Alexander McQueen's Irira dress. He had this series that evoked the shipwreck, and it was it had a lot to do probably with the black pirates who commandeered the ships and settled in the mountains in Jamaica. And I thought, well, that's so freaking cool. Because McQueen's dress was about women who undergo tremendous difficulties and come out thriving. And I thought, that's what I want to talk about. That's what I want to talk about. So then the problem was, how do I find a model who can convey this? So I contact, and so I have this really hard time finding any model that looks a little bit offbeat, who looks like I might be able to get this out of them. And I contact a couple of models of color. They won't show up. I contacted this one model who did show up. I had ordered a dress from Amazon for this shoot, but it was taking forever to show up because of all the container problems. And so she did the shoot in a bathing suit. And I didn't know until I met her, until the shoot, that she was completely the wrong person for this shoot. There was no way I was going to get I was going to get her to be able to convey the sense.
And how do you know this sense is there? How do you know, what is your relationship to the models to help you express your idea? How do you know?
It's hard because I don't know these people ahead of time.
Right.
Okay. So the first one, Lydia, she's a tattoo artist. And so I started with tattoo artists because I thought, well, they're a little offbeat. They might be able to get something out of them. Lydia was terrific. And from her, I did the painting, The Explorer. And she was the one who gave me the idea of the pirates because she wanted to see the world. Lydia went off right after the photo shoot, and she's still traveling. She's all over the place. She's become this like famous tattoo artist. She's self-taught. She's only like been doing it for 2 years, and she's totally in demand. She's off the charts in demand, and so I can't get her back as a model. But you know, there was this quality in her eyes of excitement, of horizons she hasn't been yet. Just, oh wow. And that's why I asked her. I just saw it in her eyes. There was this other woman. She was another tattoo artist, and I thought, well, maybe she would work because she was a goth girl. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, maybe I can do something with her. But when she showed up for the shoot, she was not what I was looking for. I said to her, okay, so it's the 18th century. You've been on this ship. You were brought here for an arranged marriage with a guy who you wouldn't have liked, who would have been horrible. You're here essentially freed on the coast. What are you going to do? You know that there are going to be like Indian tribes around here. You know that if you walk far enough south, you'll be able to find people. What do you do? And she just curled up in a ball. She was like, oh my God, somebody's got to save me. And I thought, okay, well, this changes the idea. Because it was, the warm season in Maine is only like 3 months. Mm-hmm. And time was ticking. I had to use her. There was, I just couldn't get people to show up to pose. Mm-hmm. So I realized, this is somebody who's waiting for somebody to save her. Which brought me to Cinderella. And it also brought me to William Golding's Pincher Martin. William Golding, who we know he got famous because he wrote Lord of the Flies, but in the 30s, in my 30s, I read everything he wrote. I loved William Golding. And one of the books that he wrote, Pincher Martin, is a World War II pilot who gets shot down, and he spends a week on a rock in the middle of the ocean. So I took this this model and put her in a kind of cross between McQueen's Iria dress, Cinderella, and stuck her on this Pincher Martin rock so that she's waiting for somebody to save her, and that somebody is not coming. Now, I'm guessing people look at that piece and it's not as uplifting as they'd like, and so.
But it's telling the truth of what's there. So art evokes emotion. It tells a truth for whoever's looking at it, right?
Right.
Regardless if it makes you feel positive or negative, I think that it served its purpose from what it sounds.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's how that idea came together.
Excellent.
And I wanted to continue that series, but when I tried to contact that model again, I couldn't get her.
Got it.
And all the other models that I contacted, I couldn't get them.
Mm-hmm.
Within my own town, I met a waitress. It's such a little town. We have one restaurant. It's only open a few months of the year. And I saw this waitress, and she was this beautiful little fireball, like a head shorter than me, and I'm small. So that was Lila. And I asked her to pose, and she came, and when I met her, she was full of life and brilliancy, and she's been through all kinds of real difficulties in her life, but she's totally come through triumphant. When she showed up to the photo shoot, she had some horrible things happen in her life. So she was really down that day. Because she was leaving for upstate New York, like right after the shoot. So she wasn't going to be around. It was do or die. So I had to take her as she was. She had family obligations, couldn't drive to the coast, so I couldn't use those rocks. So where could we see far? We live, surrounded in these trees. You can't see anything. So we climbed a mountain together, and I brought the dress, my lousy version of McQueen's Iria dress, because I got it for myself, but it fit her. So I'm working on a bunch of images of Lila, and the thing is, I was trying to get this sense of her. I was thinking about, she was on the mountain, but Lila's a survivor, and not, when you hear someone say they're a survivor, what they generally mean is I kill or be killed. Yeah. She's not like that. I'm not like that. Lila survives by always thinking, well, with Lila, she's always thinking, what would Jesus do? Lila's hardcore into Jesus. But she's one of those religious people who walks the walk. She's not just talk the talk. And so she's trying to reach her best self at all times. She's always trying to give love.
Yes. So your definition of survival.
I love Lila.
Yeah. So your definition of survival would be someone who, regardless of whatever they go through, they still hold on to their faith. They still aim to be their best self. Yes. They hold on to their core. They hold on to their inner light. They don't let other things that happen to them taint that.
Right.
That is survival versus kill or be killed. It's
right.
And still holding on to your core regardless of what happens in life.
Right. So I took these photos of Lila up on the mountain, and I started thinking about the Buddhist meditation on the mountain. Mm-hmm. And the Buddhist meditation on the mountain it's essentially, I will be solid and stable like the mountain. I will reach to the heavens, rooted to the ground like the mountain. And I only thought of that because that's who Lila is. And so the images that I got from that photo shoot, they're not wonderful. The backgrounds aren't good, things like that, but I can work with that if I get the gesture right. The light isn't wonderful. It's not so bad that I can't work with it. Almost all my photo shoots, the light stinks. It's almost all the halftones are within shadows. Oh my God, this is not classic atelier light. But when you're outside, unless you're going to start bringing in reflectors and artificial lights and stuff like that, if you're working with natural light, it's not so easy to get nice atelier light.
So then afterwards, you go into Photoshop and do what you can to adjust the lighting from your.
I do what I can to. Yeah, I don't do it in Photoshop. I do it in the GIMP. The GIMP is a free Photoshop equivalent. But yeah, I do that. And so Lila's now my favorite model. I may very well. I expect her to come back here next summer or spring, because she's got a lot of family history here. She's got a lot of family here, and I figure she'll probably be back. So I've taken all her measurements and I plan to make her a proper gown so that I can finally do Lila Resplendent. But when I think about Lila, I think about those Eastern sages on the mountain. There was a film that came out, might have been in the 90s, when Michelle Yeoh was just starting, and she was doing these Shaw Brothers Kung Fu films. She played Wing Chun.
Yep,
and
I'm very familiar with her.
Yeah. So at one point, Wing Chun goes up into the mountains and she meets with her teacher. And her teacher is this old woman, essentially a Zen master. And it's a very short scene, but when I saw that scene, I was sometime in my 30s, it stuck with me. It was like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And very Yoda, very Yoda. How can a chick become a Yoda?
Yes.
And so. Yeah, that's where I want to go with Lila.
What I find very interesting about you referencing Michelle Yeoh in the Wing Chun movie is that, because my brother is heavily into martial arts, and specifically Bruce Lee's fighting style was JKD. So when I was a kid, he was like, I'm going to teach you. And I'm like, okay, cool, whatever, big brother. So that originated from the women. They created this fighting style and it came through, and eventually Bruce Lee learned a version of it when he was studying and then adapted to create his own martial arts style. So it's like this thing that was from this one area transcended, and it created this unifying thing that still exists to now. And that's one of your themes that you continue to talk about, this transcendence of what happened then to now. Your choosing of your models, of you may have your ideas in your process. Okay, I have an idea of maybe doing this or that. Let me see what happens when I get the model. The model shows up and you're like, no, they represent something else. And you're adjusting, you're transforming. Like you're the theme that I'm hearing in your own story and how you work, and even your creative references from fashion designers to writers. There's all this element of transformation. It's the fox. Right. I just find this all very fascinating.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's like the kitsune.
That's really cool.
The kitsune is always transforming, and either it has to become something else to trick, or it has to be something else to survive, or it has to be something else to teach. It's
a kitsune with a lot of tails.
Yes, or the 9 tails. So it's very interesting that these themes are continuously appearing around you, within you, and even in the references that you pull. I found that very fascinating.
But, but that brings you also to the idea you can't plan too much. You can't, this is why I try not to be too analytical, because if you get too stuck on a fixed idea, you can't function. Okay, if I had this fixed idea, I wouldn't have made any of these paintings, because none of the models gave me what I was looking for.
It seemed like you learned your lesson from being super analytical before, being super left brain. You're like, no, there's a benefit, but the detriment to it is that I lose this. And I'm wondering, are you able now to return to achieving visions before you create your work like you did beforehand? Is part of your process, okay, you have a vision, and then like you said before, you figure it out along the way, you adapt and work with it. Is that still there for you?
There are different places of getting visions. So like the piece that I'm working right now, I have this vision that's a general roadmap of kind of sort of what I want it to look like. But I didn't start out with that vision. So the vision came later on in the process. After I saw so there was this photo that I took, and she wasn't facing the right way, but the gesture was primo. The gesture, the expression in the gesture wasn't quite what I wanted, but could be tweaked within like a millimeter. Took almost no tweaking to get the quality that I wanted.
Yes.
But the gesture was fabulous, and the lighting wasn't half bad. I just had to completely change the background and slightly change the color palette, because I wanted a sense of light, but she had all these trees behind her. Mm-hmm. So the trees also brought green into the shadows. I don't want that green. No big deal. So you don't put the green in the shadows. I had to completely change the background. That's what I'm working on right now. And it's hard. If you have to start combining photographs, changing things around, it's easy if you're not going to be that realistic. If you want to be really realistic, you got to be good. So this is the piece that I'm working on right now. And to solve these problems, I'm doing a number of studies. But yeah, I do have this vision, but I didn't start out with this vision.
Got it. Excellent. Okay, so thank you so much for your time. Let's wrap up with one last question, and then we'll be on our, you'll be on your way to great work, right? So this painting series that you're doing, is this what's next for you, or is there more that you're doing? What is next for you?
Next for me, I want to go deeper into the series. Once I met Lila, it was like, oh my God, I've been waiting forever to do this series. This is so cool. I have a lot to explore in this, but my big question is she going to show up? I think she's going to show up. So one of the things that I did this past fall, I got a bunch of patterns of 1950s ball gowns. And now I come from a family that goes way back on my mother's side as tailors. So she started teaching me how to sew at 3. I was doing fashion design throughout my childhood. I won honorable mention from Levi's in fashion design when I was 15. I didn't go into the field because it had basically left the United States by then. you know, there were no jobs. But I taught myself tailoring, you know, when I was around 20. I used to, you know, from books that I found at RISD. There, you know, I used to do a lot of sewing, and I stopped. Partly because I couldn't see very well. I've been losing my eyesight since my 40s. And that really puts a gun to my head. It really forces me to spend every moment that I can working on this, because I'm racing my eyes. So I haven't sewn in years, but I took all of Lila's measurements when she came to model. Took enough of them that I can make a dressmaker's dummy from her measurements. And so after I finish this piece that I'm doing right now, I plan to spend the rest of the winter making a dressmaker's dummy and a dummy for one of the evening gowns for her, so that then I can do a fitting when she shows up. But and during that time I'll do master copies, which will help me improve my technique. It won't be wasted time. You know, maybe I'll continue with some more of the photos that I've taken. But you know, she was so good-natured for how I posed her. I didn't expect her to come in in a sad mood. So, okay, I ripped the gown, I dyed it as though it were filthy, and I put dirt makeup all over her, and her hair is trashed. Okay, I uglied her down. You'd never know how gorgeous Lila is. I want to do her in the spring. I want to talk about how you can go through hell and that simply makes you more gorgeous. And, you know, one of the things that one of the ideas that I got last spring, you know, fashion is a language. There are books about that, you know. You can tell so much about someone by what they choose to wear, how they choose to wear it. And it's one of the visual languages I could use, one of the visual languages I could speak. I do have the skills to be able to use that. So I haven't really used it before. I want to start working that into my body of work. You know,
you're going to use making your own, usually use fashion as a language to talk about that in your work, or are you going to make some?
I'm not talking about fashion. This is not talking about fashion, but what the fashion conveys.
Okay.
And that has to do with color, line, material, all kinds of things. For instance, the reason why I chose a chiffon gown for these pieces was because I wanted to talk about expectations within our culture that that a woman be yielding, that a woman be passive. And chiffon can't stand on its own. Chiffon has no body, you know? So that's why I took these chiffon gowns, I trashed them, you know? I wanted to talk about, okay, you've got these expectations and they got in your way. You're still wearing this frickin' gown. You're tripping over this gown, so it's ripping. it's filthy. You have transcended the gown.
Yes.
Okay.
Transcended what it represents.
Yes. Yes. And that is why I'm using fashion, because there are unconscious associations we have with everything in fashion, with every choice that you make.
Right.
Like, for instance, what I'm wearing right now. This conveys practicality.
Right.
It conveys I'm not I'm not trying to be pretty. I am just businesslike. I'm just trying to get my stuff done.
Right.
Okay.
Versus me wearing white, it's like if you get anything on it, then it shows. So,
but it's radiant.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
there's also that too.
Yeah. Yeah. So fashion is this huge language, and it's kind of untapped.
Got it.
Okay. So I don't want to be wasting all my time sewing. So I don't know how much time I'll spend doing this. I don't know how far I'll go with it. I might say, oh, screw that, it's wasting my time. But it's an idea.
And it seems, as from what you're saying, that you have enough experience and knowledge that, yes, you can make these things, but even if you needed someone to do it, you could properly direct them because you have the eyes for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you need.
Right. Like, for instance, the reason why I could not emulate the Irira dress with a dress that I purchased off Amazon is because to tear it properly, the skirt needs to be cut on the bias, but it was cut straight up and down. Okay. Mm-hmm. So unless I make it myself, I can't turn that material around to cut it on the bias.
Yes. This has been a really awesome conversation. Just listening to you tell your story about your mother, her influence on you, mm-hmm. basically all of your skill sets in writing, in mm-hmm. fashion, like your family history of tailoring, even your diverse awareness of spirituality and these Jungian concepts has just been so lovely.
Thank you.
It's been like awesome listening to you talk about your process and the way that you think. Thank you for letting me take this time to get into your head. And
thank you, Alexandra.
Yes, thank you so much. And we will definitely talk more in the future.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.